Good morning again. Continuing our theme of love and God's love for us and our love for God. Pray with me, please. Do you love God more than anything? Do you love God? Do you love God more than anything? Do you love God? Your love is all He asks in return for all He's given. Love will be the endless theme of all the host of heaven. Love God more than your car or your home? Do you love God? And do you love God more than all you own? Do you love God? Love God more than family. Really, really love Him more. If you do, just let the whole world know that's all that He asks of you. Do you love God more than anything? Do you love God? Do you love God more than anything? Do you love God? Do you love God? Love God more than anything. Really, really love Him more. If you do, just let the whole world know that you love the Lord. Let the whole world know that you love the Lord. Let the whole world know that's all that He asks of you.
Good morning. I want to say something that I really mean. I love the fact that you are here. Amen. Good morning sounded good. That didn't sound so good. All right. So turn to the person next to you, and we're gonna start with a little. You're gonna thank me for this one day. A little trick. I want you to tell the person next to you that you love them, but that could be some kind of awkward depending on who's next to you, right? Paul, for you, it's not awkward. You can say, I love you. I love you. But for some of you, it's like, who are you? So if you have that type of people around you that you don't feel comfortable saying, I love you, then you can say, I love that you're here. There you go. And that's the same good sentiment, but with a slightly different words. We have different friends in our lives that we want to express sentiments, but for some people it's just weird. It's like, dude, don't love me like that. Okay, then I love that you're here. And then if the person next to you cannot honestly say that, then say, we love that you're here. So at least you're saying it true for someone else. So turn to the person next to you and tell them either I love you or I love that you're here, I love seeing you here, or tell them we love that you're here, because all of that is true. And if this is your first time visiting with us, one of the things that we do in the morning is we try to make each other feel good. So we tell things like, you look beautiful today, which is also true. Or you can tell we think or they think that you look beautiful today if you cannot honestly say it. That's okay, I'll take it. But we are happy to spend this time together. So let me tell you one more time, I love that you are here today. And we're going to talk a little bit more about love. Now, last Sabbath, if you had the chance to worship with us, it was very, in a way, a little bit intense. We talked about some very profound realities that love necessitates freedom, but freedom opens the possibility for pain. And some of the pains that we have all felt. And today, we're going to do kind of like the opposite of that. One of the churches that I used to pastor, there was a head elder, and this head elder told me that each time I preached a sermon, we would alternate because I had multiple churches, so I would have to go somewhere else. He would go and preach the opposite of what I preached. So today it's kind of like the opposite of last week. It's just that I'm doing the one who's opposing myself, because we're going to talk about a whole other area of love. And last week was a bit intense, I think. This week might be a little lighthearted, but I think it's extremely practical and useful, and I hope you will be blessed. And I want to start asking you a very simple question, and this is the question that I want you to just think about. How do you get someone to love you? All the single people, you start leaning in. Yes, looking for a boyfriend, girlfriend. Yeah, how do you get someone to love you? Any ideas? Any takers? How do you get someone to love you? Yes. You have to show love. Okay, very good, very good. Yes? You can cook for them. I am well loved. Have you been able to tell? Yes, I am well loved. In fact, I should be a little less loved, but that's a good thing, all right? You can cook for them. Okay, very good. I loved your answer. Anybody else? How can you get someone to love you? Yes. You can give them kindness. Very good. I love it. I love it. Okay. Anyone else? You have to love them? Okay. Have you ever loved somebody and they didn't love you back? Love hurts sometimes. Yeah. You've been dating and, it's been awful. Love not reciprocated. Oof. Yeah. So it's a little bit complicated, right? What do kids do to get their parents to love them? They cry, they ask for food, they cost you a lot of money, they get in trouble. What do parents do to get their kids to love them? Give them everything? Wow, you guys are some powerful kids. One of the most beautiful discussions that I have with my two children, and it's some of the most beautiful conversations are about love. I try not to do this very often. For the last few weeks, I haven't talked about them because it could be a little embarrassing, but this is something really nice, I think. But Christian tends to come at random moments, and he usually brings me a little card, and he just says, I love you, Daddy, and gives me a hug. That's his nature. That's his heart. And each time he does that, he just uplifts my heart. What could I have ever done to deserve that? Well, I kind of made him in some ways. I provide for his every need, but sure, let's not go there. Now, my other child is a little different. She's competitive. She likes to argue. So we have the most beautiful argument ever, because at times I go into her room, it's nighttime, and I tell her, I love you. And then she tells me, I love you more. It's like, no. I love you more. No. I love you more. And we do it in Spanish most of the time. So it's te amo mucho. And she would say, te amo muchísimo, which is like a lot, but a lot more. And then I said, no, yo te amo muchísimo. And then she goes, muchísimo. And then she goes, muchísimo más. And it's hard. I said, but I'm bigger than you. I love you more. I am older than you. I love you more. It's a beautiful thing when that love exists. And sometimes there's no explanation for it, right? But if there's one thing that I think defies every conception that we have about love is, can love be commanded? Can you command someone to love you? All those single people, you wish you could, right? Just love me, because why can love not be commanded? Okay, it has to come to the heart, yes. Okay, it should come naturally. It should flow from the person to love you. Okay, so let me open the Bible, and this is where it gets really interesting. And I'm going to start reading in Mark chapter 12, verse 30. Okay? And they asked Jesus, what is the most important, this is actually verse 28 to give a little context. What is the first or most important commandment of them all? And Jesus answered, the first of all commandments is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment. Can God command us to love him? But doesn't that just go against everything we talked about love? So let's spend a little bit of time unpacking this a bit, and let's see where it leads us. Now, when Jesus is quoting here, he's actually quoting from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verse 4 to 6. Susan, that was the reference. You read it perfectly. Yes. And this is called the Shema. Okay? And I'm going to go really fast over the next few minutes. I don't have the clicker, but I believe there's a clicker somewhere here that I could use. That's for the one back there. And no, that's a remote. If the clicker is somewhere, it'll come. Very good. Thank you so much. And I'm going to go really quickly. Do we have the slide with the text? Because I'm going to go really, really fast, but I'm going to do something that I haven't done in a long time. I'm going to share my notes with you. And on screen, you're going to see in a few minutes a word that you can text to a phone number. And if you do that quickly, if you text Muchness to that number, you can get a link to my very own notes. So everything that I talk about really fast, you can actually have it. And maybe you'll never look at it, but maybe one day you'll reference it. Because this text that Jesus quotes is actually a prayer that the Israelite people would tell every morning when they would get up and every night when they would go to sleep. And it's called the Shema. And it's what we read a few moments ago. But not only that, if we go back now, if you written that down, that'd be great. There in the notes, you're going to see a link where it says Shema that goes to the Shema series by the Bible Project. Excellent content. If you really want to dig deeper than what we're going to go into, you can really, really get a grasp of why the Israelites, every morning and every night, they would say this prayer, the Lord is one, I will love the Lord with all my heart, with all my... But I want to take a moment today to go to a few words in this prayer and what they might mean to us today. So the first word, and we're going to practice some Hebrew today. I haven't done Hebrew since undergrad, so this is going to be fun. But the first word in this prayer is hear. And you're going to repeat it with me. It's in Hebrew, Shema. All right? Shema. You can say it with me? Shema. You come to church and you learn Hebrew. Isn't that amazing? All right? For all of us who are not doing summer school, this is our summer school. And Shema is simply an expression of listening. And every morning when the Israelites would get up and every night when they would go to sleep, they would Shema, they would listen. And most of the times they would say Shema, Shema. It's back to back. It's to add intensity, hearing, listening, but it's also attention and focus. In the book of Psalms, when David is crying out to God, he says, Shema, hear, listen to my prayer, or Lord, hear my heart, oh God, is the sentiment of an outward. But in Exodus, for example, in Exodus 19, it says, if you shema my covenant, if you listen to my covenant, if you keep my words, I will be your God, you will be my people, and you know the rest of the story. The idea of hearing is not what many people do today when you hear. Have you ever tried to talk to children and tell them something very important? They hear, but they don't listen. There are airwaves that enter their ear. Maybe they modulate in their eardrum. Those signals get processed, but the brain does not decodify that. But this is listening. But it's not only listening, it's an active listening that leads to obedience, to doing something, to love. Hear my heart, oh God, shema my heart. And God's saying, if you listen to me, if you do these things, if you truly listen, okay, this is going to come to pass. So hearers, have an active listening and pay attention to this word, actively engage. Hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And then comes the next word that we can have a little bit of time with, and you shall love. And the word that is used in the Bible for that is ahava. You want to say it? Ahava. Ahava. Love. Love. Now, we use the word love in very interesting ways today. I've been talking actually to my kids about this. Sometimes we say, oh, I love this candy. Really? Is that what you feel for a piece of sugar? Love? I love this car you hear. Or you're driving in the car and the radio, nobody listens to the radio anymore, but the radio plays your song, Pandora plays your song, or Spotify plays your song, and you say, oh, I absolutely love this song. But love is sometimes undervalued by that. When in the Bible the word ahava is used, it actually entails a lot of things. It's not like in Greek where you had all these different words that you can think of. You have eros, and you remember those. You have philos. It actually had one word, and King Ahasuerus, he had ahava for Esther. He loved Esther. Now you can tell what kind of love that king would have for the queen. She was very beautiful. But the Bible also tells us that Jacob ahava Isaac, the type of love that a father had for a son. And David had ahava for Jonathan, intimate friendship. And then the king of Tyre had ahava towards David. It was a love that was not only political and duty-based, but also affection. In Deuteronomy and Micah 6, it says, if you love and you do these things, if you seek these things, it's an affection that leads to action, because love without action is meaningless. 1 John chapter 3, verse 18 says, love without action, don't do that. Don't be like those who love with fancy words, is what John is saying, but be of those who loves in action. Love in action. And this is the type of love that God is seeking from us, a love that acts. In 1 Corinthians 13, it says the opposite. If you do all these things, but you have no love, you're like noise. You can do a lot of things, but if all those things have no love, it's meaningless. And what God wants is a love that leads to action, and action that is motivated by love. And the word that is used is ahava. So you shall have that kind of love, an action-driven type of love, but a love that also motivates the actions that you do and for the Lord your God. And then it says, and this is how you're going to love him. You're going to love him with all your heart. In Hebrew, lev. You want to say it? Lev. We only have two more words. The last one is the fun one. Lev. Your heart. So how do you love someone with your heart? What do you think? How do you love with your heart? Your heart rate goes up? Well, yeah, maybe. I don't know. How do you love with your heart? In the time of the Hebrew Bible, the heart was where thoughts originated from. In the book of Proverbs, your thoughts come from your heart. There's time again, where everything flows. But it's also where the physical life flows from. The heart is actually where you feel things, not biologically speaking, but according to how people explained the world back then. Hannah says that she felt pain in her heart. But also she felt fear and joy, according to the book of Judges. To have joy is to have a good heart. They had a good heart. They were joyous because they had a good heart. But the heart is also where other things flow from. The desires of your heart. You may remember that from Jeremiah and from also the book of Psalms, that the desires flow from the heart. Deuteronomy 3, I will circumcise your heart, so in your heart you will desire better things. Because everything flows from the heart. But the heart is also deceitful, above all things. Guard your heart, because from it everything flows. So with that heart, with all of your heart, it says, with that you will love the Lord. But not only with all your heart, but also with your soul. And this one is a fun one to pronounce. Are you ready for it? Nefesh. I know you want to say that. Just don't spit at people around you. Especially, better wear a mask. Only those who are wearing a mask can say nefesh, okay? Nefesh. All right, nefesh. This word we typically translate as soul. But that gets really convoluted today. The root of the word is actually throat. Throat. That's why it sounds so like guttural, like nefesh. And there was a great drought, it's written out in Deuteronomy, and their throats dried up. The whole life comes from the nefesh. It's the soul. It's the whole life coming together. The vitality, the vital force comes from the soul. So your feelings, your emotions, your desire, but also your physical life, your strength, your soul, your body. What makes you you, that is the nefesh. So the commandment is that you will have affection and love and action towards God with all your heart, with your mind, with your emotions, with your affections, but also with all your heart where everything flows from, but also with all your nefesh, with your vitality, with your reasoning, with your bodily, strength. With all those things, you will love the Lord your God. And now comes the most interesting word of them all. And then you will love him with all your meod. You want to say that one with me? Meod. Now, there's a problem with this word, and it's the fact that it's not a word. It's not a noun. It's not a verb. It's an adverb. Let me give you some examples how that word is used. And nowhere else in the Bible is this word used in this sense except here. But it says that King David was meod angry. He was very angry. It says that Job was meod wealthy. He was really wealthy. The word meod is translated time and time again as very, as more, as very much. And if we were to translate this, and the scholars came up with this, not me, the best word for meod would be muchness. Just this idea of very, very much. You will love the Lord your God with all your muchness. And translators have no better word for that than strength. How do you love with your strength? You're like, I love you so much. Is that what loving with strength looks like? What does it look like to love with your strength, with your muchness? It's interesting that if we go back to Mark, both Mark and Luke choose to place two stories right after this commandment. So in chapter 12, verse 30 of Mark, and that's not going to be on the screen, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and they're kind of trying to gauge him what the most important things are. How do you love God? And when Jesus answered, this is the most important commandment, and he repeats the Shema to them, they say, you have answered right. And now Jesus says to them, you are not far, verse 34 of chapter 12, from the kingdom of God. But they went on to question him. And then he tells them the story of the widow and her two mites. You know that story, right? Jesus is sitting there in the temple, And he had been teaching and having this argument with the Pharisees. And it says that the Pharisees were coming and they were giving a lot of their offerings. They were bringing a lot of money and they were making big checks. And they probably had those big checks, you know, that we print today, making show of their generosity. But then comes this widow. And she puts in 2 mites that often gets translated into 2 pennies. The currency, you know, rate exchange is probably inaccurate. But the point is true. It was very, very little. And yet God looked at this woman and he says, she has given more than anyone else. Because people gave from their surplus. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, they gave from their abundance. They gave from whatever extra they had. But this widow gave her all. She gave her muchness. She gave her mu'ad. She gave everything that she had. She gave it all. The Pharisees, in the verses before, Jesus kind of goes very hard on them. Because these Pharisees had created out of the temple this 501c3 nonprofit organization where people could come and they could make their donations to evade taxing, but also to evade taking care of the widows and the orphans. And Jesus condemns them and says, you are creating this whole system that continues to leave the marginalized in pain. But this woman, who only had 2 pennies, she gave everything that she had. When Luke tells the story, he says that one of the Pharisees kind of wised up because Jesus said, this is the great commandment, that you will love the Lord your God with all your ahava, with all your lev, with all your nefesh, and with all your me'ad. Okay, you will love, and then you will love your neighbor as yourself. And one of the Pharisees got really wise. He said, well, who is your neighbor? You remember that story? And who did Jesus tell him? He tells him a parable of a Samaritan. There were people who had a lot. There was a Sadducee. There was a Pharisee. There were people who had education. There were people who had money. There were people who had wealth. There were people that had so much. But there was only one individual. The one that was hated. The one that was despised. The one that had the very least, perhaps. But he gave his me'ad. He gave from his muchness. He went out of his way and he helped the person who had been robbed and hurt and abused and violated, and all his belongings had been taken away from him. He helped that person. And Jesus in a way says, this person obeyed that command. This person loved with muchness. There are people who probably have a lot more than you. Susan, when you were praying a few moments ago, that really hit me. You know, maybe I don't have what it takes to love. Maybe I feel like, you know, I don't have much. Maybe I'm running on empty. Like, I cannot love like that. Well, Jesus is saying, well, I'm not asking you to love with certain amount. He wasn't debating if it was the net or if it was the gross. He said, just love with whatever muchness you have. See, what matters most is not how much you have, because there will always be people that have way more than you, like those Pharisees, like that Levi, like everyone who was walking by. But what you do with what you have. What do you do with your muchness? With what you have been given? Ellen G. White says that this widow, she did what she could. She couldn't do what the Pharisees did. She didn't have the head knowledge. She didn't have the resources. She didn't have the opportunities. She didn't have the well-being to do all those things. But she did what she could. And her act was to be a monument to her memory through all time. And her joy in eternity. And here's why. Because her heart went with her gift. Her mu'ad, her strength, everything she had went with the gift. Its value was estimated not by the worth of the coin, but by the love to God and the interest in his work that had prompted the deed. You begin to see how loving with your me'at looks like? It wasn't how much she gave that mattered, but the love with which she gave and the interest that she had in his work. And she did it in faith, believing that her heavenly Father would not overlook her own great need. It was this unselfish spirit and childlike faith that won the Savior's commendation. And somehow this widow, with only 2 pennies, continues to stir and inspire the hearts of people thousands of years later. Because God is asking us to love him with all of our affections and actions, with all of our thoughts and our physical and our emotions and our physical strength, with our desires and our choices, that we will love him with our heart where everything flows from, that we will love him with all our lives, and that we will love him with every good thing that we have with our muchness. Because when we do that, something amazing begins to happen. So here are 3 takeaways that I take from this prayer and from this story. First of all, when we give from our muchness, okay, more muchness is opened up. Or to read it a little more like I wrote it. Giving from our muchness always opens up more muchness. 2 doctors, Dr. Crum and Lenger, they did a research project in Harvard University. They got a group of ladies. They were ladies that gave hospitality service in hotels, cleaning the rooms. And they asked them how much time they spent doing exercise. You know what they all answered? 0. They were there, when guests got there. They were there when guests leave. They said, we got no time to do exercise. So they divided that group in half, and this led to all sorts of speculations and theories. But to half of them, they told them how much each of their activities affected them physically. So, making the bed, 5 calories. Cleaning the mirror very vigorously, and they were all cleaning the mirror like this. Cleaning the mirror, that's another 15 calories. Taking out the trash, that's another 30 calories. And they told them a summary of all the activities they did, and they even gave them a Fitbit so they could measure their activity. Then they invited the control group that they told nothing, and then they invited this group that they had told them how much their activities, were impacting their health. They brought them back, and they did biometric measurements of, their well-being, and they found that the group who had simply been told that what they were doing was physical exercise activity, they had 10% lower blood pressure, they had lowered their waist size, they had decreased their BMI, and they reported overall an increase in healthness and well-being. Just by knowing. Just by being aware of the muchness that they had. They weren't aware that they had something, and the moment they became aware that they had something, it opened up to more. It begins to ask all sorts of questions about how much we miss out simply because we are not aware sometimes of the muchness that we have. Maybe today you feel like you don't have much, but maybe today you have more than what you think. And maybe if you were aware to how much you had, there would be so much more muchness. Muchness also opens up to more muchness because muchness is contagious. About 3 years ago, I had lunch with a doctor. His name was Elias, and he had a passion. He was working with an underserved community in the Hampton Roads area, and he saw that so many of his patients, he was a dental surgeon, that so many people that would need his services couldn't get them because they didn't have the right paperwork, the right insurance, or they were just afraid to show up somewhere where they thought something bad could happen to them. You probably kind of understand what I'm talking about. If you don't, just think about it a little bit. They avoided being in public because they were afraid that if they were singing in public, they would get sent somewhere else. And he said, we have to do something for these people. And he came and he sat with a couple of pastors, and he shared his passion, his desire to do something. So we decided to organize a clinic. It was going to be a small clinic just to do dental surgery, extractions, clean tooth that had been run out. And we began to tell people that we were planning that event. And all of a sudden, Red Cross said, well, we want to join in too. And then Chesapeake Regional Hospital said, well, we have a mammogram track. We want to send that too. And then another dental organization, said, hey, we think this is great. We would love to send, all of our equipment, and we would like to send like a bunch of dentists there as well. Before we knew it, this thing that started with a dream to just help, a few families grew to be an event that served over 600 people in the Hampton Roads community that could have never received the service. Over 80 mammograms were given. Some diseases were caught before they took somebody's life. Over 500 extractions were done. That was a lot of pain, but also a lot of healing later. But somehow that dream, that desire to love with muchness that started with one person, it grew and it shared and it was contagious to all these other people. And all of the churches of the area came together, and it was one of the greatest celebrations and one of the high moments during our time there. The news came in and they did a report on this, but loving with muchness is contagious, and it always opens up to more muchness. When you begin to love with that, other people will begin to love with that muchness as well. And you will have muchness of joy. All right? Second takeaway, our muchness, it's all that is needed and exactly what is needed. Sometimes we feel that we have so little, right? Could I make a difference in this big world with all its big problems? Things are so messed up. It's so much easier to just be cynical and just criticize things, just post away on Facebook, just do another march. That's not bad. Well, some of it is pretty bad, actually, but some other things are not so bad. And yet, what you have could be exactly what is needed. As we were in that big event, a man named Jimmy came. And he knew we had an area where the pastors were, and we were like walking around just visiting people. And when he saw the tag that I was a pastor, he grabbed me and he told me if he could just talk to me. And he started crying because he had lost his wife about 6 months ago, and that had left him like wiped out. And he had like a toothache, but he was afraid of going to the doctor because it was at the doctor that they told him that his wife was sick. And he said, I cannot do it, and if I could, I couldn't afford it. I need glasses, and I don't have them. And I came today, and I got a brand new tooth. And I got glasses, so now I can see my wife's pictures and remember her. And then he told me something I will never forget. That's exactly what I needed. See, sometimes what we have may not be much, but it might be exactly what someone needs. And when we decide to love with our muchness, we might be answering that prayer that somebody's praying. And Jimmy told us we have been praying for months that the toothache was going to go away. And tonight I won't have a toothache anymore. It may not be much that you have, but it is exactly what somebody needs. And the last takeaway that I took from this, you take your own takeaways later. It doesn't take much to give from muchness, but it might take all of you. It might take all of you. You may have to put away sometimes your preferences. You may have to sometimes put away your pride. You may have at times to put away your leisure time, your desires. It might take everything of you, but it will be worth it. This week I was talking with one of our church members who just got back from a mission trip in Kenya. And she told me, I spent the last 2 days sleeping because that mission trip took everything from her. But she told me, I'm the happiest I have been in years. I finally got a chance to go back on a mission trip. It doesn't take much, but sometimes it might take all of you. But here's the good news. Your muchness is enough. Sorry about that. Whatever muchness you have today might be exactly what somebody else needs. And when we choose to love from our muchness, that muchness grows and expands, and it makes this world a better place. And let me tell you, sometimes it takes very little. A few days ago, I was at Food Lion, and you know during the pandemic how difficult like checkouts have been, how stressful, and there was this cashier, and I couldn't even see her mouth. I could only see her eyes. But have you ever seen somebody with heavy eyes? Yes. Like you can tell that they're like burnt, like they're on zombie mode. And this person, you know, during that time that we were like missing things and toilet paper and things, you know, I'm sure she had been scanning there for hours and hours on end. And I just told her, I wasn't going to tell her I love you because that would have been super awkward. But I said, I love that you're here and that you're still doing this work. And I know you're tired, but I want to let you know that I appreciate what you're doing and that we can get our groceries. And she just started to cry. She said, I don't know what to say. I am so burnt out. And so nobody has said even a nice thing to me. Sometimes even just saying, I love what you're doing, could make a difference in somebody's life. It just takes loving from our muchness. Okay? So how are you going to love from your muchness? And the last question, how does God get us to love him? Can he command us? I don't think so. John put it this way. We love because he first loved us. And he loved us with his muchness. He made us. He created us. He gave us that breath that you just took. He gave you health. He gave you a family or surrounded you with people. He gave you this family. Maybe the family that you're in is not very functional and they only cause pain. I get it. And when all of that wasn't enough, he gave you his son. And he says, if you listen, if you hear me, if you see that I, the Lord, you know, I am one, and if you could see how much I love you, you shall, you will. It's not a command. It's, if you would listen, you will love me. If you could see, you would love me. In Revelation, John put it this way, and they, those who choose to hear, they will see now his face. And his name, his character, will be in their foreheads, in their heart. So will we listen? Because if we listen, if we are willing to lean in, victory will be ours. Healing and joy will be ours. But will we listen? And will we love? Will we enter with God into this beautiful discussion? I love you, God. And God says, no, I don't think so. I love you more. I said, no, God, but I love you more. And God would say, oh, no, believe me, I love you more. I kind of like created the whole universe, you know. I love you more. But Jesus, I love you with my muchness. Well, God is going to say, I have more muchness. But if you love me with your muchness, that muchness will become much, much more. And that muchness is exactly what somebody needs. And that muchness is the joy that this world needs. So may you be free to receive his loving muchness today, to love with all your muchness, and find joy in his infinite love.